great. I did put together a bit of a deck, not because I believe PowerPoint's the end all be all, but because I might forget something if I didn't. So I did put this together. I'm going to roughly follow it, but I'll also keep my eye on the chat in case things come through. Um, Mostly, so I guess I'll introduce myself first. I've gotten away from doing introduction slides because having a picture of me with my video right next to it is weird. But for those of you that don't know me, my name is Ryan MacTaggart. I'm the Associate Director of Professional Learning here at Educause. And I have the distinct pleasure, really, how Penny and Don came to know me, to be the main liaison for the Executive Leaders Academy here at Educause. I was brought in, I joined Educause. It sounds like most of you have known Educause longer than I have. So I came to Educause in 2020. I was the true pandemic employee. I think my flight to my interview in DC was the last Educause sponsored flight before the pandemic hit. And then we were not traveling for a couple of years. So that's kind of my claim to fame around the Educause world. But basically how I describe my role is anything professional development related that isn't the big annual conference in October or the cybersecurity conference in May is my team. There's a separate team that does the big in-person work. We do all the online programs, hybrid programming, all that kind of stuff is me and my team. So a little bit about me. I was in higher ed before that. So I worked at Colorado State University as a faculty member and also a program coordinator in the School of Education before I joined up with Educause. So I kind of come from that higher ed background as well. But the big college, not the small private. I've never been able to experience that. So maybe someday. I wanted to start with a quick chat prompt. And I think, there's not a huge group here. So if you want to unmute, you can too. But just curious to get a feel. Have any of you attended an Educause professional learning event before? And if so, what was it? And if you've done a bunch of them, then pick one. You don't have to like list them all out. But webinars, learning labs or courses, institute programs. Obviously, we have a couple Executive Leaders Academy folks here. Just to give me a feel for what you all have seen before, chat or unmute would be helpful.
I'll unmute. I did, one I'll highlight is I did the Leadership Institute when it was still in person back in 2013, I think was that one. I've also been faculty, Ryan, you know this, all this stuff, of course, but I was also faculty for the new IT managers one, which was virtual. So I had kind of both sides of that coin.
Yeah, awesome. And the Leadership Institute is now the Academy. So same program,
right,
different name for anyone who's confused. Yeah. Okay, so demo days, webinars, pre-conference events, Jeff, nice. ELA and webinars, cool. All right, so somewhere on the gamut. Anyone that hasn't done any, like never done an Educause event, it's okay. I won't judge you. I'll assume it was before I was here and the quality just, wasn't to your standard. Okay, cool. All right, this is helpful. The other thing I want to just say, could be a chat prompt, it could just be something that's in the back of your mind. I always like to start presentations with this because I want to make sure that I'm answering the things that you're curious about. So if you left today with that, and we've all had this feeling after some sort of a presentation, dang, I thought we were going to talk about this thing, right? Like they went this way, I wanted to go that way. What would fill in that blank for you if there was something? So put another way, what do you really want to hear about today? So yeah, Don, I got scholarships on there, understanding some of the requirements.
Yeah, I think that's going to be big. And if anything, I would, obviously talking to the group, to the leadership team, but just taking a clip of that and maybe posting it in the CG directly, because especially for small colleges, I think resources are always stretched thin, and to be able to send out your tier 1 or tier 2 team to be able to get some career development would be great.
Perfect. Yep. We'll go over that for sure.
I think too how the professional development that Educause offers is beneficial for everyone, not just people who are at larger institutions, that it is applicable across the board, no matter what kind of institution you work with.
Perfect. Okay. And, Don, Penny, jump in on those, and Alan, jump in on those conversations too when we get there. If you have seen benefits, feel free to jump in with yours.
Oh yeah, huge benefits.
Cool. Well, what I'm going to do is kind of go over the portfolio quickly of like, what are these different things when you hear these terms? because, spoiler alert to Don's point, you can apply for scholarships for almost any of these. Most people don't. We very much see scholarships for the institute programs and the conferences. That's really where we see the scholarship applications, but that's not necessarily the only things that are scholarship applicable. It's pretty much anything. So I want to kind of go through the whole thing, because if you or a team member of yours is thinking like, well, I don't have 8 weeks for an institute, but I want to learn about this thing, then maybe a learning lab is for them, and you can actually apply for scholarships for those too. So I'm just going to go through kind of the whole thing. I always see our programs as kind of this Russian doll phenomenon that happens. Eden Dahlstrom, our VP, always uses the frame of reference of bites, snacks, and meals. So, we have a lot of mixed metaphors happening over here in the PL team, but I always see it this way, that we have some things that are small and they kind of fit within other programs. So on this image, the smallest Russian doll would be like a webinar, right? So 1 hour, you kind of show up, you're not expected to participate or do anything. You're just kind of, there to take in some content. It's usually very specific content from a very specific person. And then the largest doll I would put as the Executive Leaders Academy, which is a 7-month hybrid program with all sorts of different speakers. You're doing projects along the way. You're incorporating AI and other topics into what we're doing. So that's kind of the way that I would do it in level of engagement. So time commitment, how much time you put into it. And we do that on purpose to try to give different options and approaches. So I'm going to kind of skip webinars, only because webinars kind of are what they are, and I assume most of you know, and they're free to members, so you wouldn't need a scholarship to do that. But the webinars can be really great places to just get some quick information. And then if there's something in a webinar that you really like, you can probably look and see if we have something that's a little bit more involved. The other one that comes to mind is demo days. I think someone mentioned that they've been to a couple demo days in here. Yeah, Kyle's been to a couple. The demo days are kind of another one of those, because they're not, you sign up, it's free for members. The way that demo days are paid for is actually the corporate folks, the partners, are paying for their slot in the demo day. So you get to go to those and hear from them. And a demo day is all about hearing from corporate partners on what they're up to, what kind of products they're demoing. So those are really, really good. So I definitely encourage you to check those out. But another thing you wouldn't need a scholarship for. So that's why I'm going to kind of skim over those two a little bit. But they are great programs. And if you ever have questions about any of them, just reach out to me and I'm happy to set you up with those. So I'm going to jump in at Learning Labs. Learning Labs, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some links in the chat as I go here as well, so you can kind of look at how we present them online. But the Learning Labs are specific skill-based things. So these are 2 to 3 week programs with live sessions, 4 live sessions per. So that means meetings on Zoom, like we've done for our other programming, for those of you that have seen them. And they're up to 70 people. So they're bigger, they tend to be bigger groups of people, less cohort formation. It's more about the content. And they tend to be focused on really concrete topics. So here's some examples that are coming up in the beginning of 2025. This is screenshots from the website. But they are things like strategies for introverted professionals in higher ed. So that's very specific, right? That's like, okay, here are some skills for a person who's introverted and working in higher ed. Or you've got developing and teaching an online humanized course. So that's all about humanization in an online course, and it's all about skill-based work. We've got things on AI. We've got micro-credentialing. So if that's something that your school is looking at, we've got UDL, right? So you kind of get a feel. The Learning Lab is a place to go learn a specific skill set. Short program, skill-based. Those are scholarship eligible. So if there's one that you're really interested in, you can ask for a scholarship for those. Then you jump to the institute programs, which is what Alan mentioned he was faculty for. If any of you are in, director and above roles and you're interested in teaching in these, to Penny's point earlier, these are relevant to all schools of all sizes. And one of the ways that we try to make sure that happens is we try to get leaders from different school types to be faculty. You probably know and have felt that Educause membership, the majority of Educause members come from larger R1 research institutions, right? There's a lot of different reasons for that. But we are always actively seeking for small college representation as faculty members in these institutes. So I didn't put anything on here about being faculty, but I think that's a really key thing. If you're trying to get more involved, if you're trying to step into giving back to the community, that can be a really fun way to do it. So just an option. And Alan, like Alan said, Alan's done that. I don't even know, 3, 4, 5, so, some number of times that we've been able to work with Alan. So super helpful. The institute portfolio, instead of being skill based, is competency based. So the institutes are really leadership and management training. So we don't have an institute on incorporating AI into the LMS. That's a learning lab topic, right? That's a more concrete thing. The institutes are, how do we communicate with other people? How do we lead initiatives forward? How do we handle finances, right? So it's more leadership and management development. So these could be for you or people on your teams. I know people mentioned like got some new team members, trying to get them involved. We do a lot of just like higher ed lingo in there. So if you ever hire someone from outside of higher ed, the new managers can be a nice place to just get to know like, what is this thing? What are all these acronyms that are being thrown around in the education world? That's all a part of it. But just to give an example, we have the institutes are a suite of things. So it goes from new managers to executive leaders, and I'll show you that in a second. But they're all competency based. So what we have is communication is a competency in all of them, but we address it at different levels. So for example, in new managers, we're talking about interpersonal communication. How do you talk to, work with, and communicate with the other people that are right around you? And in our Managers Institute, we broaden it to organizational communication. How do you start communicating with people outside of your unit, your team? And then leadership communication in senior directors, we talk about how do you build and communicate a vision. So this could go beyond the institution, right? This is when you start working with partners, corporate partners, all those kinds of things. And then in the Executive Leaders Academy, we go to collaboration, influence, and negotiation. So we start talking about those higher level leadership skills. So you can kind of see, instead of it being how to do this specific thing, it's these leadership competencies and how they grow through your career. So to point that out is, even if you are a senior director or you're someone who's taken new managers before, we probably have an institute for you to continue to move your career forward at any stage. Or if you just hired someone, new managers might be great for them, or you might have someone on your team who would benefit from some management leadership training, but they've been there for 10 years. We can probably still challenge them with senior directors or obviously the Executive Leaders Academy. So here's the offerings. These are all the institutes. This isn't my favorite graphic I've ever put together, but I'm working on it. So hopefully this will be refined over time. But there are a management leadership stream. So new managers, senior directors. It's kind of what I just showed you. We have many people that take all three of those over the course of, I don't know, 5 to 7 years of their career. As their career changes, they'll come back to us and jump into the next one. Overlapping themes, but very different experiences in terms of content. So if someone's taking new managers and then they get promoted to a manager role, they can take managers and they'll get new and different stuff. And then we have a specific Managers Institute for cybersecurity and privacy professionals. So if you have, especially from small colleges, I know not everybody has like a CISO role, right? Or has like a specific security shop at their institution. But if you have someone who's kind of stepping into those roles and they're kind of a team of one, this is a great institute for someone like that because they can meet other people. This is the one institute that actually the majority of people do come from small colleges. And I think that's why, right? Because they can build a network of other security and privacy professionals when they're kind of a team of one or a team of two. So I would say anyone who's in the cybersecurity space, even if they're a director or they're a new manager, they can probably benefit from this institute purely for that reason alone. So that might be a common thing that would benefit from the small colleges. And then we have 2 focused on teaching and learning. So if you have teaching and learning folks in your pipeline, I know some of you probably do, and some of you, that's a whole different area. It kind of depends on how your institution is set up. But We have two of them. One is Digital Learning Innovators, which is all about kind of those individual contributor learning design kind of folks. And then Digital Learning Leaders would be for folks that are kind of leading those teams. So that might be someone that's in your line of reporting who has a team of a couple instructional designers. They're helping faculty get trained. We're going to refocus DLI, Digital Learning Innovators, into AI next year. So that teaching with AI is a big question mark right now for a lot of people. So we're going to try to bring that in. So if you have anyone in that line, those two are both pretty good. One's more leadership focused and one's more like skill focused. And yeah, Don, I see your question. Content recommendation for young tier one or intern student. Yeah, I think new managers would still be good unless there was like a specific skill they were looking for. Then you might look Learning Lab.
Right. Yeah, I just didn't want it to go over their heads or anything like that. But ultimately, we have these pool of IT interns that we work with, and just looking at some of the institute's programming, I think there could be a good fit with this. And in
Yeah.
terms of the digital learning, is there any specific software that you guys deal with or go over, or is it just general um, conversation around what these products do?
Yeah, it's a little bit more general, but what we ask them to do is kind of come to the institute with one of those in mind. So let's say they're helping with the LMS team. They would come in and our faculty will do open sessions where they chat about different, migrations or LMS things they've done, or like when AI first came through and everyone was trying to use Turnitin to like catch the cheaters and all that stuff, right? We talked about that year. So we always try to bring in kind of those new software development pieces that are happening in higher ed. And then we allow the learner to, offer up, hey, this thing's happening in my institution. Like, do you guys have any insight on that?
Right.
What I love about the faculty is if they don't know, they know someone who knows, and there's no hesitation to make a connection there. So, yeah.
That's good. Thank
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And then the last one in kind of the institute suite is data literacy, which we have had a little bit of a hard time like articulating what this is about and who it's for. But what we've kind of landed on is people beginning to use or think about data empowered approach to the work that you all are doing. So we don't want someone in data literacy who's like been working with data for 30 years and is a data guru and a data expert. They will be bored out of their mind. But if you have somebody who's newer to the team or just newer to working with data, or your shop is just trying to be more data empowered, but we don't really know step one, data literacy is a fantastic place to go. We've even had CIOs jump into data literacy because it's like, well, I'm a CIO, but we're just now getting better with data. I think as AI continues to adjust and adapt, we're finding people are coming into data literacy because they're realizing we would love to use AI and have a chatbot or something like that, but our data is too dirty to actually do that. So how do we start to clean it up? How do we start to work with it? Sometimes data literacy might be the sweet spot. So it's kind of like an outlier because it's focused on skills with data. But we did a learning lab and people were like, oh, we want more. So we just made it bigger. So the institutes are longer to give a feel of what they are. They are 8 to 12 week long programs with a live session each week. So they take a little bit more commitment. And then they're also micro credentialed programs. So if you complete new managers or you complete data literacy, you get a credential to show that to supervisors, team members, LinkedIn, all that kind of stuff. Those are the most common place that people use scholarships, that and the conference, because they're more expensive. So I don't think that's it's not a mystery, but they are a bit more expensive. And then the last one is yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, and maybe you'll cover this later, I apologize, but the scholarships are once every 2 years, someone's eligible to apply, something like that, maybe 3 years?
Yeah, you can't get a scholarship in the same year.
Okay,
So if yeah.
And where I was headed with that was that makes it you have to be very careful picking what event you want to use for that application.
Yep.
So, okay.
Yeah, like if you think you're going to do a learning lab on ChatGPT and AI, but then you think you might want to do the Data Literacy Institute later that year,
Yeah.
save your scholarship application for the Institute. Yeah.
So it sounds like you have to be more strategic about, so probably go for, if you're going to go for a scholarship, look towards maybe the bigger institutes rather than some of the smaller things that you might be able to get your organization to cover?
Yeah, yeah. Unless you know, like, hey, this year the only thing I can do is the institute. So let me, or I mean, is a learning lab,
Right.
just because of time and all that stuff. Then go ahead and apply for it for the learning lab. Yeah.
Sure. Sure.
Yep. And then the last one is the Executive Leaders Academy, which is, I'll just go over quickly because Don and Penny could give even more insight than I could. But this is a whole different thing. So this is like, hey, here's the institutes and stuff, and then here's ELA. ELA is 7 months hybrid program. You're required to go to the annual conference to have this immersion experience as a part of it. It's the only currently currently. It's the only program that we have that hybrid approach for. So it's the only one that has an in-person component. The other institutes are fully online. So if you have a team member that's interested in some professional development, the nice thing about the institutes is even if you don't get a scholarship, you're not paying for travel on top of it. And we've had people say recently, like, hey, those have to go back in person. This online thing isn't working as well. But if I look at the data, we have opened access to the institutes almost fourfold since 2019. And that's the big reason, right? Travel money is hard to come by. Um, so just so you know, your team wouldn't have to travel. Now, the challenge is if you or your team member is going to the institute, it's choppy, right? Because it's like, okay, Thursdays at 2, but then I have all these other meetings and stuff. So sometimes it takes you as a supervisor or you talking to your supervisor and making a clear plan for what is it going to look like for me to actually benefit from this and not just kind of scrape the surface. So we have some resources for that, but something to really think about. The Executive Leaders Academy is for also a pretty unique audience. It's for all of the people in the Educause world. So Educause traditionally was an IT association. I would say it no longer fits that description. And I think John O'Brien, our president, has officially said education technology professionals, right? Because it's not only IT anymore. It's teaching and learning, cybersecurity, privacy, innovation, data, and IT. So all of those folks, I think we actually have someone in ELA this year from the registrar who was, so I mean, that's happening. We're starting to see people who I wouldn't even, like, how did you even find it? But they did, and they're in it, which is awesome. But these are all folks who are either new C-suite executive leaders or they're aspiring to those positions in the next 1 to 2 years. So what we'll see is people in director roles will apply for ELA. It's also our only application-based program. So they'll apply for it and I will email them back and say, hey, notice you're a director. Are you applying for jobs? Is a director like right below the CIO at your organization? Because at big R1s, sometimes there's like 3 steps between those. But as you all know, at smaller schools, that might be the right hand person of the CIO, right? So we always try to clarify with that. So if you or someone on your team is looking for that, I would say the feedback we get on ELA is pretty overwhelmingly positive. And Don and Penny, I don't know if you'd add anything to that, but it's a really fun program. It's a really in-depth program. It's kind of the big one. I think we've given one scholarship for ELA because it's a $4,500 program, but that includes your registration to the annual conference. So it's kind of one of those things. I saw both of you on mute.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think we're waiting on each other.
Right. Yeah. I'll say that ultimately ELA and we spoke about this, Ryan, when we were at the Educause conference, but it definitely was a transformational experience. I think the big piece is just having that cohort, just people like Penny and all these different individuals that you tap into, and you're able to meet them initially, have this time with them, and then afterwards to be able to develop relationships and friendships afterwards. It's worth its weight in gold. And then just to something that you said earlier, yeah, it is a time commitment, but you guys were great about working with us. You understood if hey, we missed a session, we'll send a quick email. Hey, what did we miss? What do I have to catch up with? And you guys were wonderful in terms of taking that. So it was a great experience, and I take to heart everything that I learned, and I've applied it. So I can't speak more highly about the program.
Yeah, same. And I don't fall in either of those categories. I wasn't new and I wasn't aspiring, and I've been in the position for quite some time, but I felt like it was a way for me to sort of get inspired again and learn maybe some new things that I hadn't experienced before. And it was all of that and more. And I just couldn't recommend it more highly to folks. I do think one of the most important things you can do though is if you commit, you commit
Right.
and block off time on your calendar every single week to devote, because while you don't meet every week, you need to be reading the material or watching the videos and doing your weekly assignments, so that you don't get behind. Because I know a couple of the people in our cohort did get behind, and it's very, very difficult to catch up if you get significantly behind.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I would say that's true for all the institutes, to be honest. We'll always be flexible. And I mean, I think I just issued a credential to someone who finished new managers like 4 months ago because they had, an illness in the family, all these things. And I'm not here to, we're here to just help you move careers and teams forward. I always go back to that as the principal. And if that means you need some extra time, it's fine with us. But to Penny's point, it's really hard if you get too far behind. So if you send someone to an institute, particularly if they get a scholarship, we are going to kind of lean on that person a little bit to keep up with us and keep pace, because we want them to get what they came for. And I would say that the person who I just gave the credential to, they didn't really get what they came for because it was so separated out. But they need the credential to go back and say why they use the financial support, right? So it's all part of it.
Yeah. There's one more thing I would say is the thing that I realized, and every time that we covered something within ELA, I tried to um, implement it week by week. So you really start to be able to understand. So, you can take something out of the lecture and then try to apply it. I think you get a lot more value and bang for your buck when you do it that way.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and the ELA is a little bit unique too. So I kept using the term faculty. So the institutes are led by leaders in our community. So Alan's done it. I'm sure I'm going to get Penny and Don sucked into it someday, right? But the idea is that they're people who don't have to be CIOs, because for new managers, sometimes the best people to teach new managers are like managers or senior directors, right? Because they were there kind of recently. Sometimes you get that CIO role and they're like, I haven't been a new manager in 20 years, right? And it's like a different way to come at it. So we're always looking for people in our community who lead the institutes. ELA is a little different in the sense that we do have that. So we have faculty members who are leaders in our community, usually names that you've probably heard if you've been to the Educause conference and stuff like that. But the live sessions and the lectures, as Don referred to, are often usually experts from outside. So we have a module on data. We bring in 3 chief data officers to lead that module. We have a module on business acumen. We bring in 3 chief business officers or chief finance officers to run that module, right? So you're actually hearing from kind of the various experts. This year, we were able to bring in the chief innovation officer from ProSci, the change management kind of gurus, to do multiple sessions for ELA. So we're always trying to kind of bring that in, where in the other institutes, we don't do that on purpose, because the chief innovation officers from ProSci talking to a new manager is like too much, right? They're like, I don't drive change like that. That just overwhelms me. So that's kind of some of the differences in that. So let's get into what was the most pressing thing. And I'm going to put a link in the chat for you about scholarships. I will say Alan is right. You can't have a scholarship within 24 months, although I have seen some exceptions to that. But the general rule of thumb is 24 months. So you definitely want to be strategic with this, but it is to the individual. So, Zach, if you got one, just because you're at Berry College doesn't mean that one of your colleagues couldn't also use one, right? It's not based on the institution, it's based on the individual. Now, we do look at that for like, okay, we've given 8 scholarships to Berry College in the last 2 years. Like, we probably are going to look at that and pay attention to it. But it's always worth an application anyway. The big things to qualify for this, honestly, what we look at, you've got to be employed in an Educause member institution. So non-members aren't eligible. I would assume all of you, since you're in the CGs, are members. Yeah, Zach.
Thanks. Before we transition to scholarships, real quick, looking at the different institutes, a while ago, I did the Data Literacy Institute. This would have been years ago. And one of the challenges I found was the majority of the people in that institute were from much larger institutions.
Yeah.
And so the kind of challenges they were wrestling with were felt in many ways similar, but very different than what I was. I was curious if, for the folks on the call, executive leadership aside, because that's not anything I would be particularly interested in at this point. If there were any of the institutes that felt like, for small colleges in particular, might be more or less sensitive to institution size.
Mm-hmm. It's a good question. The only real answer, the real answer is it depends, which is an annoying answer. The other answer I can give is when we figure out who's in the institute, we do try to group people with some intention in order for like breakout conversations, or some of the institutes have group assignments in them. And sometimes we've started leaning more into, should those groups be people who are different, or should they be people who are similar? And we are finding institution size, just in the last 6 months, I've heard this more and more, that grouping people with similar institution size might be a sweet spot. So I would say the answer is no today, but in the future, I'm hoping that that's a bigger consideration, because you're not the only one who's mentioned this to me. Penny and Don and Alan, you'll recognize Dave Lyle's name from Ithaca. He's been faculty for ELA for 3 years in a row, just won the leadership award this year. And he was the one who brought this up to me recently and was like, hey, what are we doing about institution size? I was like, okay, fair question. We need to figure that out. So, yeah, I think that's one of our goals in the next year. And I have a little peek around the corner slide later that I'll talk about some ideas that are coming down the pipe that I think would allow us to serve that even more. Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't know, Alan. Alan, is there anything? I mean, would you add anything from your perspective with the board and everything?
I don't have much to add. No, I mean, it's definitely a concern. We talk about it at the board level. I bring it up a lot too. It's like a broken record for me too. About the small, so it's something, there's a concern about it. And it's not, the reality is, if you look at the total number of institutions out there that aren't R1s, we actually have a disproportionate focus on R1s compared to our membership. Right? Because there's a lot of medium and small colleges out there. So if you do the math, we should have far more small college programming than we currently do.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's something that comes up, but I don't have much to add. Sorry to ramble.
Yeah, no, that's great. I just didn't know. I was like, Alan might actually have insight that I don't. So and the ideas have been kicked around of doing a new managers specifically for small and medium colleges, right? So those ideas have been kicked around. I mean, if I had to be frank with you, sometimes we try to do stuff like that and then no one shows up. And it happens in the cybersecurity world too. Like, we have that institute and it was like, you have to create this. Our community needs it. And then like 5 people registered. And we were like, okay, wait, what was the miss?
And there may be a self-fulfilling prophecy there, because you may have an issue where if you're at a smaller institution, you may be less likely to be aware of the opportunities that would serve you the greatest. So
yeah, and I think part of it is that awareness piece is big. And so we might lean on you all someday to help us if we think that could be something meaningful. We are not opposed to it. We love to hear from the members of, hey, I think a new manager specifically for small and medium colleges would be really cool. We would love to try to give that a shot, but I'll probably send an email back and say, hey, can you help us get the word out? Alan, I saw you unmute.
Yeah, I was going to say, small colleges, because of smaller staffs, end up with people, there's less turnover, not less turnover. I guess where I was going with this is, would there ever be consideration of kind of a hybrid institute where it was kind of a combination of new IT managers and whatever the next one is?
Managers.
Okay, yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Because like for my staff, for instance, I don't have a lot of new IT managers. I've been fortunate to have a stable staff, but some of them could still benefit from something. So they don't quite fit into either. And again, having been faculty for new IT managers, I could see it not quite fitting with some of my staff. So it's almost like in the middle. So again, it would be a custom build, which is more work, but just throwing that out there.
I'm trying to give me more work, Alan. Come on. Yeah, no, I mean, I think all those kinds of things, because it is technically more work, but we have all the pieces, right? It's just putting the
Right.
puzzle together in a slightly different way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the idea for sure. Okay, scholarships. We good? Do you want me? Are we good to transition, or anyone have other like general? Okay, perfect. Let's talk scholarships for a minute. So I put the link in the chat so you can look at all the details there if you want to. Obviously, the big one we're going to look for is demonstrate financial need, right? So there's a part on the application that you have to describe financial need. Can't receive a scholarship in the last 24 months. I have seen exceptions for that. Mostly when it's like they got an institute scholarship like early 2023 and now they want to go to the conference in 2024. I've seen there be conversations around that. Everything has to be turned in. So all that to say, the requirements are not actually that intense. We really want this to be an accessible thing for people. So there's some limiting factors, but there's not, your place in the organization, not a limiting factor. Your membership status at Educause other than being a member, not a factor, right? So we don't want there to be a bunch of things in your way. So something to think about there. If you think you want a scholarship or you have someone that wants to do it, I would say it's almost worth tossing in an application. You'll notice that if you go to the bottom, you'll see some of the eligible Educause events, and you'll notice the learning labs and things aren't listed there. That's because, like you all said, if we're going to give someone a scholarship, we want it to be for one of the more expensive programs. Now, if there was a learning lab that you were like, this is so key to me and I can't come up with the couple $100 or whatever it is for that exact learning lab, if you email me or you email someone on our team, I'm happy to take that to our scholarship committee and say, hey, could we consider this? But we do tend to save them for the bigger events because those are the more expensive events. I think that's just the logical rationale there. But you see all the different institutes, and then you can also see the cybersecurity conference, also the teaching and learning symposium. I don't know if anyone was able to see that at all. Last year was the first year we did it, but it's an online all-day event focused on teaching and learning professionals. Really cool event, really fun. And then you got the annual conference. So, and these dates need to be updated. We already have the institute schedule laid out for 2025, so there are definitely 2025 events coming down the pipeline for that. And we'll be in Nashville next year for the annual conference, if that's something that interests you. Other things with scholarships that I wanted to mention. They do go through a review process. So Alan mentioned he was on the committee for it. So I'm on the committee, and then there's a couple community members, and we review them and we score them, and then we award from there. So it definitely isn't automatic. I would say if you apply for a scholarship, I don't know, Alan, what would you say? But I would say it's like maybe a third of them get approved. Like it's not like 100% approval, that's for sure. But
it's not. And but I do want to emphasize that I'm really glad this topic came up, because when I was on the committee, at least, and so I'm interested to see whether it's still the same, we didn't get that many applications. Considering how impactful this would be to so many institutions. I mean, when I was on the committee, it's not like we had lots of money back then and we don't have money now, right? No one had money ever. So I was always surprised at how few applications we got compared to the opportunity. So I don't know, is this still like that, Ryan, or are there more? Okay.
I think I would say, and these numbers are kind of made up, but pretty accurate. I think for the Managers Institute that I ran this summer, we awarded 1 scholarship and we had 2 applications.
Oh my goodness. That's just like mind blowing,
Yeah.
Yeah. How many total scholarship slots are there? Just, how many do you normally slate out?
There's usually 1 per institute. But if we get towards the end of the year and it's like, well, no one applied for this new manager's one, sometimes we roll those into another one. The other thing that can happen in scholarships is people can donate money or funds or there's ways to like fill the scholarship fund with a little bit extra. So Educause and the board, they dedicate a certain amount per year, but there's ways for the fund to build a little bit. So sometimes we can offer multiple. So if we get 2 really good applications for an institute, we'll usually reach back out to the finance team and say, hey, they're both really good. Can they both be funded, or do we need to pick one? And they'll let us know what we need to do. Because we want to disperse it. I think the big thing with that is we don't want all the scholarships to go to the annual conference. So, because that one we do get, I don't know how many applications, but I would say we get more for annual than we do for some of the institute programs. So, yeah. But to Alan's point, you might be the only one that applies. So it's not a bad idea. And you can apply. You can't get multiple scholarships in 2 years, but you can apply for multiple. So if you have someone on your team that applies for a new manager scholarship in May and they don't get it, they could apply again for new managers in the fall. And there's nothing really stopping them from doing that. And there's times that we have good applications that I'll actually behind the scenes reach out to the person who didn't get it and say, hey, your application was really strong. If you want to reapply for new managers in the fall, here's the dates, and you can do that. So that's always an option too. Alan, any other things you'd say about scholarships? I don't want to move on before we address the whole thing, but
I want to just summarize something again to hit on it twice. Educause wants to give out these scholarships, right?
yeah.
So please pass that along to your teams, to other schools and institutions. And just for the record, I have one person. I've received 2 scholarships in my career, a couple of them quite a while ago. But one of my team members has received it twice, one for ELI, and then 2 years later, like 25 months later, got one for the annual.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've tried to take advantage of it, and, just Educause wants to support people to attend these things.
Yeah. Yeah, the money is allotted only for scholarships. So the money in the scholarship fund, it's not like we can use it at the end of the year for something else. This is what it's for. So yeah, good point. Any questions from Dawn? Do you have any scholarship questions?
No, this is great, and it will force me to rethink some things. Just to give you guys a window into my mind. So ultimately, we have these great programs that we run with Perscolis and NPower, where we bring in IT interns, and ultimately we have our partner peer institutions that are part of it. So we are bringing in basically individuals who may not necessarily have a career in tech. They get trained up in an 18-week program, and then we take them in. So we are trying to get them more acclimated with the ed tech space, hoping that they will gravitate towards this side of the fence, because ultimately we need more people to deal with our databases and websites and everything else. So giving them a path to be able to learn and become managers and see EdTech as a real potential career path for them is what we were hoping to do. So we know we're going to have to kick out some money to make some of this happen. But if there was some scholarship opportunities for some of these guys and these kids to be able to participate in some of this programming, it would be great. So
nice.
But, yeah.
Yeah. The other thing we have too, if you scroll down on the scholarship page, is we do have a student scholarship. We call it the Professional Pipeline Student Scholarship, and that's a bigger. It's a different thing, and Moran Technology, I believe, is still involved in it. But that is actually, they get a complimentary registration to the conference. Okay. They get hotel accommodations at the conference, and they get a travel stipend. They get set up with a mentor. So if you really have kind of that student level person who you think is really interested and has some promise in the field, that is such a cool program for them. At the conference, they get recognized. It's kind of a very we want you here kind of a model. So that's another thing to look at. It's a little more competitive, but it's definitely worth looking into.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ryan, I'm curious. I have a few young starting out help desk and instructional technology people that I'd really love to get some professional development for. What's the turnaround time on the scholarship before the institute course would start? Like how far in advance do they apply, and how long does it take to find out, just for planning purposes?
Yeah, that's a great question. So they can apply. I want to say the windows are open for a few months before, so they can apply pretty early. And then we review them, I want to say a month before it starts, or they find out a month before. So we review them, I think, anywhere between 4 and 6 weeks before the institute starts. So it can change a little bit depending on, hey, we just got a late application. Can we review this one too? Like those kinds of things will happen sometimes. But for the most part, yeah, you want them kind of looking ahead, but it doesn't have to be, hey, next year, I want to take this institute. It can be this fall, this spring, and you can usually still apply for those. Yeah. Cool.
Great, thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know we're coming up on time a little bit here, but I did want to talk about a couple things that don't need scholarships because they're free. So just to kind of point out, we do have some other resources if this would help anyone on your team or yourself. In the Connect platform, which is where the CGs are, we have a whole mentoring platform, and my colleague Sarah Brinker Good runs it. So it's a very high touch. We're there to help you. We curate mentoring for ELA, but otherwise, Connect mentoring, and actually, I think right now we have more mentors than we do mentees. So we literally have people in there waiting to work with mentees. And one of the things we hear from our young professionals a lot is, I'd love to have a mentor, but I don't even know how to start that conversation. Well, the Connect platform will literally pair you with somebody, and they are ready, they're willing, they signed up. So that's a great place if you want to send some of your younger team members, and not young by age, but even just new to higher ed or new to the field of IT. It's free. It's in there as long as you're a member. You can get in there, and then most of those relationships last anywhere from 1 to 3 months, and we get really good feedback on it. It's just a matter of getting people in there. So that is kind of a no-brainer. And the mentors come from different institution sizes, different places, and you fill out kind of a form, and the system gives you some matching, some pairing. So then you just contact them and go from there. And then we also offer more executive mentoring and coaching, both through ELA, and then at the annual conference, we do some executive coaching slots. So if you have someone on your team who you do see has that executive potential or desire, maybe that's good for them. And those are free. Obviously, ELA is not free, but those are free. The other thing we have is the Educause pathways, which I'll just put a link in chat and let you explore. But this came out of members saying, like, so Don, to your point, especially maybe some newer people to the field, I don't know what the heck the next step even is. Like, is this a career? Is this a job? What am I doing? Right. And the pathways can help paint that picture. So they can click on whichever pathway fits for their model, and it will lay out early, mid, advanced career stages. What are the things you can do to learn along the way? So, right, engage in mentoring, join a community group. Here's a competency that you might want to start to build, which is around finances as an early career. What is that you could think about? You could take a learning lab. And we have all these different kind of things in here. So then at the advanced level, we've got different stuff, right? Start presenting at conferences and things like that. Check out our deal with ProSci, where you can do a change management certification at a discount. So the pathways are kind of a nice place to send people. And there's a toolkit in there, which is a Google folder, a Google file that you can fill out and make your own. And what I love about those is we have one for the person that's going through the pathways for themselves. So they're exploring the pathway for their own career and thinking about it. But the reality is sometimes that is overwhelming for people. So we also have a toolkit in there for the mentor of that person to help guide them. So if you have a younger team member, a newer team member, and you want to have a conversation with them about their career path, we have that resource there for you. They can get in the pathway, they can look at it, and they can start to paint that picture. And what that will do is that will say, hey, maybe you should take the Managers Institute in the next year or two. Okay, well, I'm going to do a scholarship. And if I apply for that scholarship, I don't apply, right? So it might just be somewhere to start leaning into kind of the path and the process for people. If you have questions on pathway stuff, reach out anytime. I just didn't want to go through it in detail. If Don, Penny, if folks in your group want to know more about it, I can always come do a 10-minute little walkthrough during these meetings too, if that would helpful. The last thing is I just want to give, and Alan, don't get me in trouble for this, but I want to give a little bit of a peek around the corner of what we're thinking about on the PL team. And these are things, and Zach already ruined the surprise, but one of those things is thinking about institution size and how do we group people into professional learning together. The other thing we're thinking about is, do institutes need to be 8 weeks long? Could an institute be 3 intensive days where you take the time from work, you get your boss on board, and you say, for 3 days, I'm focusing on my leadership and management skills. And so we're calling those immersion events, and I'm hoping to launch the first couple in early fall of 2025. So we're thinking about kind of new models and new ways to engage in it. So I wanted to tell you all about that, because if you look at the website today and then you look at the website in 8 months, it might look pretty different. So mostly just keep your eye out. So if something seems like it might fit or it doesn't quite fit, keep your eye out and then just reach out to me if it's like, hey, here's me or here's my team member. Would this even work for us? I will be honest with you. I am not here to make money. I'm not going to be like, yes, Jason, this is the program for you, right? Like, if it's not your program, it's not your program. And I will tell you that honestly. But we do have some, I think, pretty fun and exciting ideas that I think would benefit small colleges in particular. I think that immersion model, because it's hard for someone at a small college who's on a small team to take 8 weeks of all this energy, but it's like, hey, you go do that thing for 3 days, you lean in heavy, and then come back. That might be a better model. So we're going to just try to create more options for people in 2025. So,
and yeah, I guess to jump in on that, especially if those are in-person options, there's a lot of online meeting fatigue, and frankly, folks don't really feel like a training opportunity is an opportunity if they really aren't away from their day job while it's happening. So,
yep,
more of that I think would be beneficial.
hard to focus. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we're exploring that. Obviously, going full in person raises the price of everything like pretty intensely. Getting a space in a hotel is like an automatic. I was shocked at what we paid for AV for an event
But
recently.
you have a network of
But
colleges and universities to reach out to.
yeah,
I was just gonna
So I
say,
don't know why. Yeah, let's
yeah,
not
that's
go
what we're.
there.
This was at the annual conference where we have all these contracts around spaces we
Right,
can and
yeah.
can't use. But yeah, we're exploring that too, like campus-based programming. Yeah, I mean, there's all those things. And honestly, I would love to hear from you all. I know we're almost out of time today, but email or I can come back or something. I would love to hear if you all had some ideas of like, this would really resonate. This would feel right for the small college community. Yeah, I'm always open to kind of hearing that stuff.